All right, well, if you have your Bible, turn with me to John chapter 5. If you don't have your Bible, again, you can scan that code. They'll be on the screen. And we'd love to send you home with a free Bible today. Just make sure you pick one up in the lobby before you leave. But we're going to be in John chapter 5 today. And would you please stand with me for the reading of God's Word, just in anticipation of what God is going to say to us through His Word today. John chapter 5. Says this, afterwards, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Now, we don't know what holy day it was. It probably wasn't Passover because John had told us it's been Passover before. This is probably one of the other Jewish holy days, which we don't really understand in our culture. It's most likely, or the best thing that you can relate it to is probably like New Year's Eve in Times Square. There's just so many people all there celebrating. That's what's happening in Jerusalem. They're inside the city. They're near the sheep gate. Now, the word gate isn't there in the original language. It's just the sheep thingy or the sheepish. And so we have to fill in, well, what did John mean when he said the sheep thing? And so the King James Version, the New King James, and that line of text fills in the word market. But all the other lines, that one that we're using says gate. Because there was a sheep gate in Jerusalem. It was near the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. And crowds of sick people, blind, lame, and paralyzed, lay on the porches. And one of the men laying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me in the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." And Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." And instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But this miracle happened on the Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders objected. They said to the man who was cured, "You can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat." But he replied, "The man who healed me told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" "Who said such a thing as that?" they demanded. The man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. But afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, "Now you're well, so stop sinning, or something even worse may happen to you." Then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had healed him. And so, the Jewish leaders began harassing Jesus for breaking the Sabbath rules. But Jesus replied, "My Father is always working, and so am I." You may be seated. My Father is always working, and so am I. This miracle, we got to know the context of what's happening here. It's happening on the Sabbath. Now, we don't really truly fully understand what this means because we don't do the Sabbath anymore. Because Jesus told us, you don't have to. It's over. But the Jewish context in the first century, the Sabbath was a day set aside every single week, the last day of the week, where they did absolutely nothing. You were not allowed to work. And God told them specifically, do not work on this day. And so if your religious system is built on following the rules, and God says don't work, you must clearly define what work means, because you can't break the rule to not work on the Sabbath day. And so the Jewish religious leaders, over the thousands of years, they had this rule, built all these other rules around this idea to not work. And so you got to do that, because if you can't break this rule, or else God's going to punish you, and God's going to be mad at you, and God's going to give you all these consequences, right? So you have all these other rules. And one of those rules was you can't carry a sleeping mat on the Sabbath. That's considered work. Today, in Israel, or for those who practice the Sabbath day in other parts of the country, but in Israel specifically, if like one of the things that they've decided that it constitutes work is if you press a button in an elevator. That's working. So you can't press a button in an elevator. And so if you live on like the 7th floor of an apartment building in Israel, the elevators stop at every single floor, so you don't have to press a button and break the Sabbath law. And if you break the Sabbath law, the consequences for working on the Sabbath was the death penalty. So this is a very serious thing. It's a very serious thing that God told the nation of Israel to do. And they did. As a pattern of God created the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. God created the earth in 6 days, right? And on the seventh day he rested. And so when our rhythm of the week is we work for 6 days, and on the seventh day we rest. And Jesus showed up and said, you are worshiping the Sabbath day. You are like building your entire life around all these rules so that you don't work. You weren't made for the Sabbath day, Jesus said. The Sabbath day was made for you. It was a blessing to you. And how many of you are wondering how experience the blessing of the principle of a Sabbath? How many of you have a day set aside every single week where you do absolutely nothing? Nothing productive. Nothing that constitutes working. You just sit and chill and rest and enjoy and be carefree, spend time with the family, worship God, talk about things. Do you have a day in your life where you just chill? If you don't, you should. And if you don't, you might say that, man, my life is too busy for that. Oh, I got so many things to do. I don't have time to do nothing. I got such a long list of stuff. I got too many things to do, too many this and that and the other thing. I always got all this stuff. You're overwhelmed with all the things you got to do. Well, yeah, you're overwhelmed. You need a day to do nothing, to rest and recharge, refuel, and re-energize. And God uses that to give you more time and energy than you ever dreamed you would have. You need a day. We need a day. And not only is the Sabbath day an important part of this story, but where this event happens is also an important part of the story. It happened in the city of Jerusalem near the sheepish thing, which is probably the sheep gate, near this pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. John gives us so many details. And up until about 75 years ago, like let's say 100 years ago, there were some scholars that would say that John had no clue of what he was talking about. He wrote a paper, many people believe this guy, and said that the writer of the Gospel of John could not have been John because this guy doesn't know about Jerusalem, he doesn't understand the geography, he doesn't understand the history. Like some person later in history wrote the Gospel of John. John could not have written it, and one of the verses that they pointed to support their claim was this one. Because you could go to Jerusalem, you could go by the sheep gate, you could do archaeology, and they couldn't find this pool of Bethesda with these 5 covered porches. They couldn't find it. And they said, look, John's making stuff up. And that's what that guy said about 100 years ago. Well, fast forward from him about 25 years, so this is 75 years ago. Guess what? They found it. They were digging and they found it. And this is how it works. Like, people have been trying to disprove the Bible for thousands and thousands of years. They've been trying to attack it from every different angle. They're trying to say that this isn't historical, and this isn't true, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this historical geography thing is wrong. And it's like, just keep looking. Just keep looking. The more that they question, the more that you dig, the more they find the stuff. It's there. I mean, to go back 2,000 years and find this, like 75 years ago, like that's incredible. Like this Word of God that we have is true in every way. And it's so important in our lives. And so it tells us about the Sabbath, that this was an important day for the Jewish people. It tells us this event happened at the sheep place, the sheep gate. And at that gate, John tells us, were crowds of sick people. The blind were there, the lame were there, the paralyzed were there. They laid on these porches. And one of the guys in particular had been sick for 38 years there. And when Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he talked to him. So Jesus was there in this big Jerusalem downtown city. And there's crowds and crowds and crowds of people there celebrating the holy day, right? And here's these other group of people, this other crowd of people that was sitting by these pools. And they were sick. They were lame, they were paralyzed, and they didn't have, hospitals like we do today in our world. They didn't have health care like they do today in our world. This is first century. And if you can't move, you can't see, like there ain't nobody cleaning up for you. Your body is still functioning, but you can't do anything about it. You know what I'm saying? So that area has got to be horrendous. The smell, the stench, the visual of the people laying there for doing nothing about it for years and years. This guy, 38 years. And here's Jesus in the city. Instead of going with the crowds of people, goes and chooses to spend time with this group of people that nobody wanted to hang out with. This group of people that nobody wanted to be with, Jesus goes to and wants to talk to them, to hear their story, to hear what's going on in this person's life. And I wonder, when's the last time you've done something like that? Where you've intentionally put yourself in a messy situation and tried to just be there and listen and love. Do you go where people don't usually go and care and love people that our world doesn't value very much? Do you do that? Jesus did. Jesus did. And he goes to find one person in particular. Sometimes when we look at these big issues of all these people that are dealing with all sorts of things, we put it in our minds that these problems are too big for us to do anything about. I mean, we're all aware, right? Lancaster has a homelessness problem. What are we doing about it? It's so big, I don't know how to. I mean, people are addicted to all sorts of substances and things, and it's like, what are we doing about it? And it's like when we think that it's such a big problem that we don't even know where to start. We don't even know where to begin. And so we don't do anything. But this is Jesus teaching us a very different way of approaching a huge problem like that. He tells us and models for us here that we gotta do for one what we wish we could do for everyone. Like, can you just visualize this crowd, these pools? Jesus is walking to find this man, and he's literally walking over paralyzed people, hoping not to step on their hands or touch their head or step in their mess or whatever. And he's trying to get around them and maneuver around them, and he finally makes it to the one guy he wanted to talk to for 38 years who's been stuck there. He's doing for the one guy what all these other people, they were probably like, hey, you stopping for me? Oh, you're going to help me? What are you doing? Why are you walking over us? They're probably wondering. But Jesus is doing all of that to get to this one person. And sometimes we like to read ourselves into the Bible like we're Jesus and we're going to go and help some people. But in this story, you and I, we're the paralyzed guy who's been stuck there for 38 years. And Jesus is the one that's kind of cutting through the crowds and coming over to us. And he asks them the simple question, do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? And on the surface, of course I do. I want to go. I want to travel the world. I want to go to the market. I want to go to the park. I want to play with my kids. I want to go do all this stuff. I can't. I've been stuck here for 38 years. That's not what he says. He says, I can't, sir, the sick man said. For I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Somebody else always gets there ahead of me. Somebody else. Somebody else always gets there. Somebody else always gets the blessing. Somebody else always gets the job. Somebody else always gets the raise. Somebody else. It's never going to happen to me. Oh, my life is not good. I mean, my life, I can't be left out and forgotten. It's everybody else gets it. Everybody else does the right job. This is called having a victim mentality, where everyone's always out to get you all the time, and everybody, your life has just got no hope. But there's somebody in this church, and if you talk to him long enough, he'll tell you, he used to think like this. And he would say that the difference between a victim and a victor is 2 letters. That's it. But this guy was so stuck in his I can't world. He's 38 years of being comfortable with his dysfunctional life, like we can be. We think about the things in our life, our family, and say, well, like, our family just doesn't get along. That's just the way it is, and it's just the way it'll always be. Or I can't keep a job for more than a year. That's just the way I am, and it's just the way it'll always be. Or my friends and my relationships, and my marriage, it's not great. It's just the way that it is, and it's just the way it'll always be. I can't do anything about this. This victim mentality. He's allowed his situation to determine his destiny. He's limited himself in the situation that he's in. He's stuck there. And he's got good reasons. We're good at coming up with reasons to justify our unwillingness or our inability to change. We all got real good reasons that we come up with. And this guy had some good reasons. Remember his reason? He said, I couldn't get into the water whenever it bubbles up. You're like, that's a reason? You're paralyzed, dude. That water ain't going to do nothing for you. But that's where his hope was. That's what he was trusting in. Even if it was some crazy thing, he had decided in his head that that was going to be the thing. And he has developed this victim mentality that, everybody else was doing it, but I couldn't do it. And this whole idea of trusting in this water, there was like a spring in these pools that bubbled up every once in a while. And so people had created this mythology around it, and it's included in the one line of text that the King James Version is taken from. It puts verse 5 in there. You might see in your Bibles it jumps from I think it's verse 4 to verse 6. It skips verse 5. Verse 5 tells us this myth. It's like this was thing that was passed around. It just reiterates what the guy said in the last verse that we looked at. But he was trusting in when this spring bubbled up, that's when I get in the water. And again, we laugh at that and say, that water is going to do nothing to help you. They believed some crazy stuff back then. And you're like, yeah, but they believe some crazy stuff today too. You just take a walk down the street and you'll be able to see shop after shop selling you the cure to get well. You can get well if you buy these crystals and put them in your home and, okay. You want to know about yourself and you want to know about the future. Okay, well, go get your palm read and go read these tarot cards and, you could do all sorts of things. Read your horoscope in the newspaper or online. I want to know who I am and I want to know what my future holds. Like, those things will never work for you. They will always want you getting more and more, and somebody else will always be doing it better, and somebody else will always get a different kind of thing, and somebody else will always, be ahead of you, and it will never really, truly make you whole and heal you. This guy's got good reasons to justify his unwillingness or inability to change. But Jesus comes to him anyway. Don't miss this part. He's got so many excuses. He doesn't even tell Jesus, yes, I want to get well. And Jesus still tells him anyway, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. And instantly the man was healed, and so what did he do? He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. And everyone should be, praising God, crescendo. That's the best part of the whole message. That's the best part of the whole story. Like, someone's healed. He's been paralyzed for 38 years, and now he's healed. Woo! Like, go, Jesus! But the whole point that John tells us this story is not that. The whole point of the story is for John to shine a giant spotlight on how the law can do nothing to help people. The only thing the law can do is cause someone to die. And so, when somebody sees somebody breaking the law, walking around carrying a sleeping mat in this instance, they say, well, that guy was paralyzed for 38 years, but that miracle happened on the Sabbath day. And so the Jewish leaders objected to that. They said to the man who was cured, "You can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat." And he replied, "Well, the man who healed me told me to do so." "You, who said that?" they said, and they demanded, and the man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. See, John includes this miracle in his gospel to ask us this deep question. He says, do you want to be bound by a rule that's going to kill you for carrying a mat? Or do you want to be made whole? Jesus goes up to this guy and says, "Hey, carry this mat. You're good. Walk with it." And he did. Knowing he was breaking the law, breaking the rule. He did because Jesus was the one that made him whole. Jesus was the one to do it. And this man showed he was willing to break the law in order to obey Jesus and to escape the rigid boundaries of the law. This man was willing to do it, and I believe we should be willing to as well. We need to be willing to break religious tradition, religious ritual that keep people from experiencing Jesus. We need to be willing to give up our safety and comfort and our security in the religious traditions and the religious rituals and the religious systems in order to follow Jesus. Because Jesus literally tells this guy to commit a crime. And he does. It's amazing. It's remarkable, this man's faith to do this. But if somebody heals you, come on. What choice do you have? I'm just doing what this guy told me to do. You couldn't do it apparently, but he could. So I'm going with him. We got to talk about healing though for a second, because it's a big part of this story. And in our culture, in our church world, sometimes healing gets a little strange sometimes. I'm kind of on the outside of this, but this is me kind of looking in. Sometimes you might see like these healing things, these healing services pop up at these churches or whatever, and they'll claim, bring your sick and your lame and your paralyzed to these places, and the anointed pastor will like do something, and you'll leave there healed. You come in with crutches and you'll leave with good, And it's like, okay, well, let's take a look at what the Bible says about something like that. Like in this particular instance, like they didn't come to the church to get the healing. Jesus went to the person in the crowd of people who were sick and healed the guy there. Like I want to see a healing service at the hospital where there's people in need and sick and just discharge everybody down the hallway. That'd be amazing. I want to see that. But they put on these gatherings or events or whatever and do this healing thing, and they would say sometimes, and maybe you've heard this before, or maybe somebody said this to you before, but like if it doesn't work, it's never, the person in my position's fault, is it? They would say something like, well, if you're not healed, it's your fault. You didn't have enough faith. You didn't have enough faith. And maybe some of you have heard that before, that the reason that you're still sick is because you don't believe enough. Or the reason you still deal with this issue, or you still struggle with this physical ailment or this thing, is because you don't have enough faith. Let me just tell you that you need to stop believing that today, now. Like, be set free from that. And the reason I can say that so confidently is because this text tells us about a man who was healed by Jesus. And I want you to see how much faith did this guy have. Okay? How much faith did he have? He had zero faith. Like as little a zero as humanly possible. He didn't even know Jesus healed him. He had no clue. Jesus disappeared into the crowd. We got to know, guys, that everything good in our life comes from God. It doesn't come from us. Like, we're just this paralyzed guy, 38 years, sitting here, like, what can we do? And God shows up and is so good and is so generous and heals and restores and redeems We don't deserve it. We've done nothing to earn it. It just shows up. This guy had zero faith. And Jesus just goes on with his day. Incredible story. But that is a challenging thought, isn't it? That God would bless somebody who has zero faith. That God would show up in somebody's life who literally has no clue what's happening. That God would heal somebody who's never even prayed a prayer or been to church or done anything spiritual in their whole life. That God would work in their life. That challenges our hearts. Our traditional kind of religious, conservative hearts. To say really God would do that for no reason? God's working in that person? They don't even know what they're doing, really? It challenges the religious, conservative, traditional kind of way of thinking about life and God and relationship with God. But it also challenges the other side of the coin as well. The kind of liberal, hey, do whatever you want kind of crowd. Jesus is an equal opportunity offender. And so he doesn't just leave this guy alone and say, hey, go man, you're healed, just do whatever you want to do. No, he actually catches up with this guy later in the temple. And he tells him, look, dude, you're well, so stop sinning. Or something even worse may happen to you. And then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who healed him. Right? He finally learned. And this is an interesting phrase to kind of consider. What is Jesus doing here? What is Jesus telling this guy? Maybe, and some people might think that there's a sin that this guy committed that made him paralyzed, and that's what, he was there for 38 years, and now that Jesus healed him, he went right back on sinning the same way he did 38 years ago. I don't see that in the text. I don't see John telling us that. John doesn't really tell us anything that this man did or his sin. But I think what Jesus is doing here is he's drawing us and he's helping this guy see the bigger picture. He's like, it's great, man, that your body is healed. Great. But you have a real you inside of you. You have a soul. You have a spirit inside of you, that there's a bigger issue that we need to deal with. We can't just think all about the physical. And that's great that your body's doing great, but you got a soul that's going to live forever somewhere. And if it's separated from God now, it's going to be separated from God for eternity. You got to deal with this sin issue, this sin thing. And this goes down to the core of all of us. When we wake up in the morning and it's we have this feeling. It's hard to even put into words, but it's I got this. I can do this. I own this. I can control this. My life, I got this. I'm in charge. Jesus wants to deal with that. He wants to help you realize, you got to deal with this thing. It's not just about the physical well-being and it's great that your body's doing great, but you got to deal with your sin, the spiritual side, the real you. And Jesus tells them, look, you can't just do whatever you want. You got to stop sinning. But I think it's the big culture, but now we're going to get even deeper here because we're going to look at the specific context that John is telling us here about why Jesus tells them this. Again, there's nothing in the text that says this guy's sinning other than the quote-unquote sin that he's carrying a mat around on the Sabbath day. And the religious leaders knew that he was breaking the law. That was sinning. And so what's happening here is that Jesus goes and finds this guy in the temple because this guy is causing a mad ruckus in the temple. He's carrying a mat. He's literally visibly breaking the law, walking around where all the people are, and the religious leaders don't know what to do with this guy. The penalty for breaking the Sabbath is death. And they're like, we got to kill this guy. We got to charge him and we got to get rid of him. He's breaking the rules. And so here's Jesus. He's coming up and he's going to help this guy. And he's like, look, man, I know I told you to do this. Imagine that conversation. I know I told you to do this, but you got to stop or else they're going to kill you. And I think Jesus was so intentional with this that he waited, for the right religious people to be around him, and everyone's trying to figure this out. There's a shouting match going on, and Jesus comes over to him and he's like, hey man, and he talks loud enough so that everyone can hear. And he says, hey dude, I know that you're well. I know that you've been stuck on that mat for 38 years, and I know you're walking again, but hey, you need to stop it. or else they're going to kill you. Like, they're going to kill you for carrying that mat. I don't think Jesus is talking to the guy. I think Jesus is talking to, like, the crowd. And he's trying to, like, poke fun at them. He's trying to, like, make them realize that you're going to kill this guy for carrying a mat? Are you serious? Like, is that really how you want to live your life? Is to kill a guy for carrying a mat who he'd been laying on that mat for 38 years? Is that how you want to live your life? And of course, when you say something like that to somebody, they get mad at you. And so the Jewish leaders began harassing Jesus for breaking the Sabbath rules. And Jesus replied, "My Father is always working, and so am I." That's what's called a mic drop moment. He's saying that the Sabbath day was made for you, for the people, for the humans. And it was a way to express your faith in a God that is always working. You rest because you trust that God's working. You rest because God's still working. And Jesus shows up and says, "You rest on the Sabbath, but I don't. I'm God," he's saying. And we're going to unpack that a whole lot more next week. So I hope you don't miss next week, because Jesus really dives into what that means and really talks incredible about all of that. But before we end today, we just got to pause and just reflect on this amazing miracle that John records for us. Because it digs deep into all of our hearts. Let's just start with the religious people, the religious leaders. Jesus challenges us by telling us that God's always working. And when we try to put nice, clean, clear-cut boxes, God's always working. God's always working beyond the limitations that we set on Him. God's always working. God's always working in groups of people that we know are sinning and who are sinners. God is always working. And this miracle also touches the hearts of those of us who are what we call rule breakers. Just can't seem to live up to the standards, or don't really care about it, or you've been stuck where you've been stuck for 38 years like that guy's been stuck there. This miracle shows us a God that will tiptoe around other people to get to you. Because He wants to heal you, and He wants to restore you, and He wants to free you from the bondage of trying to follow a set of rules that you were never designed to try to follow in the first place. Jesus said it's not about the rules. In fact, I'm going to change your life so much, transform your life so much that you're going to continue to break rules. You're just going to do it now in Jesus' name. For 38 years. 38 years this guy's stuck. 38 years this guy can't do anything. And Jesus shows up in his life, transforms his life, heals him, and he rolls up his mat. And he runs to where all the people are. And everyone gets freaked out because he's breaking the law. And I almost guarantee, I don't know this for sure, but I guarantee that he had no clue that he was breaking the law. Because why would you even consider? Why would you know that rule? He's been stuck on that mat for 38 years. He doesn't need to know he can't carry a mat. He's just doing what Jesus told him to do. So he's probably confused and wondering, what in the world is going on? What world did I wake up in today? And you know, the same can be true in our Christian life experience. That God shows up into our life, He heals us, He redeems us, He restores us, and we start like bringing our junk into our new life, and everyone's like, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh no, that's against the law. Oh, you can't do that in church. Oh no, that's bad. That's it." And we're like, really? I mean, I was stuck for 38 years, and now I'm here. Like, come on, we need to celebrate that. We got to be more concerned about what God is doing in somebody's life than the rules that they're breaking. And He shows up. Jesus shows up in this guy's life. He shows up in all of our lives. And He's the challenge. It's like, okay, I'm a Christian. I'm saved. I'm forgiven. I have eternal life. but like I'm still addicted. Or I'm a Christian, and I'm saved, I'm forgiven, I'm made new, but I'm still depressed. Or I'm a Christian, I'm saved, I'm renewed, but where I work and where I live and where I play isn't exactly Christ-like. Well, of course it's not. It's been that way for 38 years. You've been developed patterns of behavior and ways of thinking that have kept you. You're like, it's not just going to disappear overnight. I mean, it might. That'd be amazing. But it's a lifelong process of what's called sanctification, of God transforming your life, of leading you one step at a time closer to the person that He's made you to be. And we got to do it with some hard work sometimes, with some determination and dedication, but we also got to do it in conjunction with the Holy Spirit, working in our life to bring about this transformation. And it's not going to happen all at one time. It's going to happen a little step at a time. A little step at a time, a little step at a time. But I'm telling you, God is working. He's always working. Just don't let the religious people get in your way. Let's pray. God, thank you so much that you are working. That you are working in our life even when it's hard to see. That you're working in people's lives that we as Christians or religious people might be like, oh man, they're so far gone. Yeah, God, you are always working. To challenge us, God, by this text, by this scripture, that we would be excited about your work in people's lives, that we would celebrate what you're doing in people's lives, and that we would recognize that you are at work in our life, in my life. Sometimes it might get a little dark and dreary and say, man, God, really, have you forgotten me? Have you abandoned me? I still deal with this sin after all these years. I still deal with this condition after all these years. God, are you going to take this away from me? God's still working. God's still working. If you're still alive, He's still working on you. And He's still working on me. So God, thank you for that.